Good afternoon all. I'm Rahul Yadav. I represent Gujarat Fluorochemicals. I serve as a regulatory compliance manager in Gujarat Fluorochemicals. And today's topic, product stewardship going beyond regulatory compliance. This topic itself defines what actually product stewardship in comprehensive principle should be. It should be beyond regulatory. The usual common definition associated with what is product stewardship is the act of minimizing the health, safety, environment, and social impact of product and its packaging throughout all the life cycle stages while also maximizing economic benefit. The major stress over here is throughout the life cycle stage. And the usual conventional approach, usually what happens, the product stewardship function within an organization, especially in Indian context, is seen as a regulatory compliance division. Basically, whether we are complying with REACH regulations, whether we have safety data sheets in place, whether we have proper labeling, let it be a product labeling, transport labeling, all these regulatory compliances which are essential to run the businesses are part of function of product stewardship. No doubt they are part of product stewardship function. However, the product stewardship is much more than only meeting the regulatory compliances. And basically, if we apply product stewardship in totality, it will also be a key enabler, a key instrument which will help us to meet our sustainable development goals. For example, Indian Chemical Council, under its flagship initiative of responsible care, endorses a comprehensive product stewardship principles. Product stewardship principles, if you see on the screen, it starts from responsible sourcing, identifying the suppliers, applying the green chemistry principles, best available techniques for during the sustainable manufacturing, hazard communication and product safety. These are the two parts right now we are focused in within the product stewardship community. And then the end of life, how you dispose the product, whether there is a possibility to reuse it, and then it goes back to responsible sourcing. Possibly right now we are focused on the cradle to gate approach, but with the circular economy coming into the picture, we are trying to come up with a process which should be cradle to cradle. And probably product stewardship could be a very good instrument to achieve that. Right now, these are the key principles. These are around 10 principles. Looking at the time constraint, I would restrict myself in the principle of prioritization, product risk characterization, risk management measures, value chain communications. Hopefully, with this presentation, I would be able to give you some tools which will help us to, achieve our sustainability goals. Sustainable supply chain. What I foresee that supplier information is a lifeblood of a sustainability program. As correctly mentioned that we are the scope 3 for probably a Western world, for Europe or US. But in this supply chain, someone is also our supply chain. For example, my manufacturing unit is in Dahej, or is in Bharuch or in Ankleshwar. Over there are small, medium enterprises. We need to get the supplier information for them. So for us to get the supplier information, it's very important to have a supplier engagement. For us, probably we are the crowd, we are the audience who are much educated about the sustainable practices. But what are the other functions? For example, marketing and sales doesn't know what is the scope 1 and scope 2. They don't know how to calculate scope 3. We talk in length about scope 3, but how does our supplier knows what does it mean by scope 3, especially the MSME part of our industry. So identifying and tracking source of all ingredients are very important. And the tools for the screening, tools for achieving that sustainable supply chain information is that supply chain engagement. It's very key for us. Training them, having a supplier regulatory questionnaires. Not only making the regulatory questionnaires, we also need to educate them why we need these regulatory questionnaires. Probably after understanding that, they will come up with the accuracy of the supply chain information which they give to us. And we have ISO 20400 sustainable procurement policies. Probably we can take the benefit of those best principles of ISO 20400 procurement policy, embedded with the regulatory questionnaires, and educate the customers with the continuous supplier audits. So this will help us to get the important information. Once we get the information, we can then make an informed decision whether this supplier is providing me the product carbon footprint scope 1, scope 2. Okay, if it is giving me scope 1, scope 2, how hazardous is this chemical? And are there any alternatives to that? So this is a very key part of the prioritization. Second, the commercial product screening. Once we define our product, but there is a possibility, for example, I have one product with 4 key ingredients, and one of the key ingredients has the possibility to come under the persistent organic pollutant list or SVHC list of Europe. Before becoming a restricted, they come up with a draft solution that we have the intention to put this chemical under this so-and-so restrictive list. So with the continuous screening, we will come to know, okay, why this product has the possibility or this ingredient has the possibility of being restricted. So let's reformulate it in advance, proactively, so my supply chain will not be disrupted, my business will be not disrupted. So it is very important to have continuous risk assessment. Apart from that, having a customer feedback is also very important, and it comes under the product stewardship. So benefits are proactive and safer changes in product reformulation. Sometimes voluntary restrictions we can also put on. For example, we come from industry where we give our products to a few of the food contact materials industries, which are very, very heavily restricted. So if we are aware that probably, let's say, bisphenol is going to be restricted, so let's say we will voluntarily not enter into the food contact material, probably we will go into some other market. So those kind of informed decisions which management might take will come through the product stewardship, and we will guide the management that this is the possibility, probably it might be better that we go to some other applications. Product risk characterization. Ideally, product risk characterization is product risk identification. Before going ahead of product risk identification, how to do that, I want to set a context of product risk characterization, why it is so important. Currently, the ESG reporting structure, which we have for chemical industry, it is revolving around the end of the pipe, reactive modes. For example, what are the emissions, spills, reputational risk associated with the chemical accidents? Okay, they are very important for ESG reporting to make an assessment about an organization. However, if we shift our focus in the front-end chemical selection and product design, we might end up with the product which will be inherently safer, which will avoid this reputational risk or emissions and spills. So that's where the safer chemistry plays a very important role. As our speaker said that about EU Green Deal. EU Green Deal is a very ambitious deal of Europe, that it's a legislative instrument by way of which they are trying to get 2050 goal of carbon neutrality. By 2030, they want to reduce their emission by 55%. But this EU Green Deal is also not talking only about the carbon. If you see on the screen, they want to have a zero pollution, toxic-free environment, mobilizing industry for circular economy. Under EU Green Deal, there is a chemical strategy for sustainability. As our previous speaker said, that safe and sustainable by design. They are coming up with this one draft, probably it's still under the draft provision, that if you apply safe and sustainable by design criteria, it will be a one substance, one assessment. If your product passes through that assessment of safety, process safety, environment and health exposure, LCS, social responsibility, all these parameters will be taken care of. So it's a very comprehensive document. And since Europe is the chief regulator of the world, for example, REACH regulation, ROHS regulation was first introduced by Europe, and later on, with the various versions, it got adopted in US, Japan, Australia, you name any country, but the real model regulation always comes from Europe. So this safe and sustainable by design criteria, if we adopt it, probably we will be much ahead in the curve of applying the green principle chemistries. Product risk characterization, chemical footprint reduction. We talked in very great deal about the carbon footprint. What about the chemical footprint? When I say chemical footprint, chemical of concerns in your product supply chain. How to identify chemical of concern in product supply chain and how to reduce. These are the probable action plan which can help us. It's identify and prioritize chemical of concern within your chemical inventory, substitute chemical of concerns, and where substitutions are not possible, put a risk management measures which will reduce the impact. Identify and prioritize chemical of concerns. So there is a very good public literature available by a US NGO called Greenpeace. They have come up with a very methodological, systematic way to identify which are the chemical of concerns. They have around 20 to 30 endpoints, health hazard endpoints, environmental health points. And if you go through all those parameters, you will come to know how many of your product or supply chain raw materials are chemical of concerns. Let's say out of 300, your 25 chemicals you have identified that they are chemicals of concern. So what will you do with that? So next step is substitute them. How will we substitute? For that, another public literature is available, which is very comprehensive, which is developed by International Chemical Secretariat of Europe. Basically, it gives a list which is developed for how many chemicals have the possibility to come under restriction and what are their possible substitution available already in the market. It's completely free and it's called a SIN list. So this can be explored while doing the substitution part. Now coming to the life cycle assessment. Since this is a sustainability conclave, everybody is talking about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Majorly what I have seen that it's revolving around the PCF, product carbon footprint. But when you truly apply the life cycle assessment principles based on the ISO standard 14040, if you see on the screen, there are 10 to 12 different parameters, not only carbon footprint. For example, toxicity, ozone depletion potential, water depletion potential, primary energy demand. So once you do the life cycle assessment of a product, it gives you the data where is the maximum environmental load or social load is happening on your product. For example, we have one product, manufacturing, there are 4 manufacturing steps. So once you do the LCA assessment of those products, you will come to know that my stage 3 is emitting the maximum carbon footprint. So probably instead of doing for entire cycle, you directly approach to the step 3 and use the renewable energy resources on the step 3 of the manufacturing process. By this way, you will greatly reduce the requirement of renewable energy because it is right now at the current stage, we do not have ample of renewable energy resources and which are also not very cheap to, to cater all our needs of energy intensive processes. Once we have done the risk identification, risk characterization, the results which we got, the data which we got, it will help us to facilitate to make the informed decisions. For example, the decisions could be engineering control measures, which revolves with your product safety. Emission controls, as I said, which is the maximum impact producing part of your manufacturing unit. Over here, you can use the renewable energy goals, you can link up with them. Guidance to the customer about end user, how to safely use your product, which comes under the responsible sales and marketing. Then product reformulation, repackaging, part of your regulatory compliance. Voluntary restriction, it will enhance your reputation. It will reduce your regulatory risks. Feasibility of recycling and reuse and unused product about circular economy. Over here, I want to emphasize, if in this design phase itself, we have a safer chemistry. So during the circular part, during the recycling part, it will be much easier to recycle them. For example, I have one product, which is carcinogenic, persistent, bioaccumulative in nature. So during recycling phase, a recycler will always have a question, how many hazardous chemical it has? If there are no hazardous chemical, or let's say 2 or 3 hazardous chemicals which are very less hazardous, for example, skin sensitizer or acute toxicity category 4 harmful is followed. In that case, they will say, okay, let's go and do the recycling part because there is no inherent risk involved with the product. So during the product designing phase, if we go and choose a raw material which is greener, less hazardous, it will help us to move from linear economy to circular economy. Value chain communication and cooperation. Basically, what I mean by that is a regulatory advocacy part. It is a very key aspect of product stewardship or any function of product stewardship. For example, as Mr. Kumra said, that Indian Chemical Management Safety Rule, India is looking to build a REACH-like concept like India REACH, which is currently, I think, in the 5th draft. So over there, industry was consciously asked, what are your inputs? That is a time where a product stewardship professional can come into the place and can say, probably REACH is good for Europe, As Sir said, that during the inception of the EU REACH, they did not have any data. Now we have the data. So do we have to model that regulation? Probably not. We can take a leverage of their ECA database, and we can come up with the system. For example, we will, let's say, right now in the draft, there are 2 stages, notification and the registration of priority substance. So let's go with the notification, and later on, gradually, as our industry understands what are the requirements, then move up with the more and more stringent part of the applying that regulation or modeling that regulation. So there is the part where we, as product stewardship function, come up and represent our industry. Second, join a product stewardship group. What we see, especially in our continent, in our country, product stewardship, there are no communities as if now, if I see that which is revolving about the, or which is dealing about the product stewardship. There are no readily available networking groups where you can go and you can sit together and discuss about the product stewardship matters. So this is one thing where a product stewardship function should proactively be engaged, probably go through the webinars, attend trade shows like this, where they get the more ideas. And we have to be on the continuous vigilant on the regulatory actions, NGO campaigns, specifically to our industry. For example, I represent the fluoropolymer industry, so I need to know what are the major regulations which can impact the fluoropolymer industry. So the value chain communication is also a very key aspect of the product stewardship. As we all agree that we cannot foresee what is coming in the pipeline, let it be sustainability goals or regulatory actions, which chemicals, probably we do not have enough of data to classify a product carcinogenic, but after 10 years, 15 years, with some additional data or scientific input, it could be endocrine disruptors, it could be a carcinogenic. So we cannot anticipate all the things in advance, but yes, with the networking, engaging with the stakeholders, learning, we can, develop a robust product stewardship program. So as I said, the product stewardship, first of all, need to be understood that it's not just a regulatory compliance division. Second, it's a continuous evolving function. You have to be continuously learning and upgrading yourself. So as I said on the presentation, that it's not a process, it's not a process, it's not a destination, it's a journey. So take it as a product stewardship as a journey beyond the regulatory compliance. So with this I conclude my presentation. Thank you.